We're gonna get started. Everybody come on to the back. We're gonna get started with the presentation. I said we're gonna get started in a few minutes, and you gotta come to the back, please. Oye, pero qué? I said what I said. Oye, pero vengan para acá. We're gonna get started, people. I said we're gonna get started. All right, guys, we're gonna get started. Please come on to the back. Bring your chairs, because there's not a lot of chairs over here.
Okay. And with all the panelists, please come to the front as well. The panelists. We are starting in 2 minutes. 2 minutes. 2 minutes to save the world. Come on, y'all. I'm just making sure we live on Facebook, we live streaming, we're going to record this, you know, because we need to show the children of the future. That's right, we're recording. The children of the future need to know where they came from. It's the people from our past that gave us what we are today, and today is for tomorrow. Oh, yeah. Yes, girl, see? Oh, not now. Okay, ahorita. Okay. All right, y'all. It's popping. It's popping. Espérate. All right, let's make sure we live. See, once I start, I'll go like this. So wait till they stop. Beautiful, look at this. Everybody be ready. Ladies and gentlemen, anybody that's still waiting, please come. Have a seat. If you guys want to see the introduction, make your way this way. Make your way this way. I know. And you walk through. Hey, if I walk through, I can get a word. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're about to start. That's right. Are y'all ready? Because she is ready. So I'm making sure that everybody's ready. Oh, we got Bronx Native 12 up in here. That's right. Let's definitely take a moment to just center ourselves. And I actually, before we actually formally start, I do have a special friend here today. His name is Robert Arnell, and he's going to do a blessing for us. And he's also going to talk about his amazing ministry, which I think will kick off the Bronx LGBT Expo in such a great way, because it's actually the reason why we're here. But I'll get into a little bit of that later. So first, I really want to center ourselves, bring ourselves, down to the ground. I know there's a lot of fun activities that are going to happen, All right, so without any further ado, Robert Arnell, we would like to come to the stage. Thank you so much. Round of applause.
Thanks, Ramon. Thanks, everybody. So whatever energy you connect with, whatever, close your eyes, rest your gaze, and let's take a moment just to bless the space. So source of energy and love. I first want to thank you for the opportunity for this space to be created. Ramon, who was instrumental in creating a space for the creative, the queer community to be authentic. May we tap into his energy and the energy of all our ancestors, both familiar and our queer ancestors. And may this expo be an expression of that love and energy that we bring in your many names and in the connection with love and compassion we come to you. Amen and ashe. So just a little talk. A lot of people in general kind of feel a little bit uncomfortable talking about faith because they think it's all about religion. My story came from a Pentecostal background. I grew up and love you in two different languages at the same time. But in that environment, I found myself torn. I found myself wanting to connect to a spirituality that I love. I love my church community, but I also was hearing a message from the pulpit telling me that I was wrong and I was not good enough in God's eyes. So that started my journey of denying myself of who I was. I went into conversion therapy. That didn't work, obviously. That went into depression. Here's a pill, here's some therapy, here's everything. But they weren't looking at what the underlying issue was, is that disconnection between who I was and who I was named, and a God that people were telling me was not happy with me. So after going through that journey and just saying, listen, I don't care what anybody got to say about the way that I show up to whoever my divine is, I got to find it for myself. I don't have to regurgitate it or mimic what your definition of God is. I got to find who that God is for myself. So as a result, I was able to reconcile that. I'm in the process of going through ordination to become clergy with the Metropolitan Community Church. I do my main mission and calling, am I good enough? Am I worth? Am I who I was made to be? And I'm here to say, you are. Who you are is the very definition of who the divine is. And the way that you love yourself is the way that you love your neighbor and the way that you love whoever your God is. I'm not the only one in this. I have a good dear friend, Rocky. He also is part of this conversion therapy survivors group. And it's just a testament, like, it's just not me. there's a lot of other voices out there. So you can look me up. My website is actually the Latino Gay Christian. Got a lot of layers with that. I talk about issues that reflect the Latinx community, the queer community, and also any spiritual or religious community. And if you want to connect out to me, I'll be here for a few more minutes, and it'll be great to have that conversation. So thank you for the space. Thank you, Janelle. Thank you.
All right, so give it up for Robert Arnau. Yes, wasn't that amazing? That is the way that we kick off the Expo. You know, so thank you so much for that blessing. It is so needed, you know, to ground us. So, are you ready to have fun? Are you ready to be educated? Are you ready to learn something new? Are you happy to be out of the house? Yes. Okay, very good. So first, a few housekeeping things. There's 2 bathrooms, all genders, right here on the side. Please keep your phones kind of like on silent, please, as much as possible. Just because, you know, it's just no loud laughing. I mean, you know, tonight, but while we're here, you know, people are talking, just be respectful. Okay, thank you so much. All right, real quick shout out to the platinum sponsors. Recoveries Are Us, Destination Tomorrow, AHF. Yes. All right. So the mission of the Bronx LGBT Expo. The mission is to highlight and feature the Bronx and its LGBTQ community. We are one of the most diverse New York City boroughs, and we distinctively carry ourselves with pride as we share our similarities and celebrate our differences. It is our pleasure to provide an all-inclusive panorama of interactive performances in many different genres throughout the entire space. Enjoy vocal performances, drag performances, mini ball showcases, LGBT short films and forums, performances, art, and much more. Event participation. As you can see, we have all these vendors. Definitely go around, introduce yourself, talk to people, connect. This is an opportunity. So Jose Ramon started the White Shirt Project, right? So the White Shirt Project created by the late Jose Ramon was a healing journey in the crossroads of PTSD and depression. The White Shirt Project was created by the late Jose Ramon to basically bring awareness around mental health in a different way. It captured people's attention because it was a picture, but at the end of the day, it has a picture with a story, right? And Rob mentioned some layers about, the different layers. A picture can have many different. What's the phrase? A picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, these pictures, and the reason why we're all here today is because he also created the LGBT Expo. So round of applause to Jose. That is quite a legacy. All right. So don't want to keep you guys too long. I'm actually going to bring to the stage the woman behind it all, because this woman is powerful. All this. Honestly, I'm without words because honestly, I knew of her, and now I swear we are connected at the hip. We are never going to leave each other's side. I love her. She's powerful in every way, and without any further ado, Connie Pacheco.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming out. My name is Connie Pacheco. I own Recoveries Are Us, which is a vocational training program for the provision of the CASAC, which is the credential in the state of New York. And if you don't know who he is, he's right here. You guys know him as Jose Ramon. So this is about him. When he created the LGBT Expo, it was about creating a platform to bring agencies together to educate and inform, particularly the LGBT community, and letting individuals know and the community know that there's services out there. We do have services and there's availability, because I think that the LGBT community is one of the most underserved populations there is when it comes down to substance use or mental health. And there's services out there. I know there are, but what happens is that people don't know that they're out there. And sometimes, the stigmas associated, that was one of the highlights of Joey's work, is that he wanted to diminish the stigmas with regards to mental health and substance and addiction, right? And promote recovery. So we want people to know that the services are out there, and it's okay for you to come. And for those of you who don't know, I'm sure you know by now, I want to talk a little bit more about this. Joey was, you know, he's a pioneer, and he, a year ago, not a year ago, but in 2020, he was diagnosed with ALS. And, you know, he left us a year later. How devastating this disease is. And I can't even bring myself to talk about this now. This is so real for me. But anyway, he did leave behind a legacy. He left a platform for not just me, but for everybody in this room, so that we can come together and talk about this serious issue. And so today on the table, we added ALS, and we have Chris Curtin here from Compassionate Care ALS, and he's going to talk about that with ALS. I'm not going to talk much about that because he's going to do that. But because I'm going to get emotional, but I just want to say that in spirit, he's here. I'm so happy that he created these platforms, and in such a short time. This is only the third LGBT Expo. Same thing with the White Shirt Project, like Jamil was saying. The White Shirt Project was a vision for him. You know, we started the White Shirt Project with a picture of myself in a Marilyn Monroe wig, right? Messing around, and that was his vision, to create a platform to bring people together. If you look at the White Shirt Project in the Geno Entertainment, which is his website, you can read up about all the photographs and the models in those particular photographs. It is currently now, and hopefully have a home for them and on either the Bronx Museum or one of the archives, folks with community college, who are working on that. So we want to continue his legacy and the hard work that he put into this, not just this expo, but the White Shirt Project. And believe me, this is a lot of work. So Joey, my hat comes off to him. So without further ado, I'm going to give this back to Jamil so that we can get started with the panel. Thank you so much for being here today.
Very good. Thank you, Connie. Yes, give it up to Connie. All right. So here we go. Connie. Let's actually bring up Chris Curtin, who's going to talk to us a little bit about ALS, okay? And then after that,
ALS also. We are a 501c nonprofit that solely supports the ALS population, people that are going through the journey of ALS. I was blessed to meet Jose early on in his diagnosis. He had a short-lived battle with ALS due to the type of ALS that he had. His ALS was called bulbar onset, so it's a type of ALS that starts up here in your mouth, and it affects the motor neurons in your mouth. So it kind of sounds like you've been drinking all day when you haven't been. So his ability to speak was immediately impacted by his ALS. So bulbar onset ALS is the most aggressive form of ALS. So onset of diagnosis, it's 12 to 18 months until your journey with ALS will be over. It's a very small percentage of the population with ALS, probably 5 to 10%. 80% of the ALS population is called sporadic ALS, where it's kind of like a limb onset. So it starts maybe with a foot drop. It starts with, your fingers are curling a little bit. You can't kind of get them open. You're having a hard time buttoning your shirts or your pants or tying your shoes. So that's called sporadic ALS. And another small percentage, 5 to 10%, is called familiar ALS, which is a genetic form of ALS. So it's hereditary. So there's a C9 or an SOD1 gene that you inherit from generations before you. And all in all, ALS is an underfunded disease. We still to this day don't have a cure for ALS. It's been around for over 80 years. You guys probably also know it as Lou Gehrig's disease. And most recently, earlier this month, the Major League Baseball Foundation organization actually recognized June 2nd as Lou Gehrig's Day. And we're able to go out into Major League Baseball, and every Major League Baseball team across the United States was able to honor Lou Gehrig and also represent all of those people living with ALS. Like I said earlier, ALS is an underfunded disease. We do not have enough money going into research to find a cure. We still don't. On average, it's about 30,000 Americans living with ALS annually. And the statistics these are harsh statistics, but it's the truth. Every 90 minutes, someone's diagnosed with ALS, and every 90 minutes, someone dies from ALS. On average, one in 300 men are going to get diagnosed with ALS, and 1 in every 200 women will get diagnosed with ALS. Jose was a remarkable person, as most of you know. He opened his home to me when he was newly diagnosed, and I was able to go into his home and support him in any way possible. Some of the things that we do at CCALS is we provide loaner equipment. So I was able to give him a recliner chair, tilted space wheelchair, a commode. Towards the end, I gave him a hospital bed, which he never used. He hated it. He loved his recliner chair, and that's where he wanted to be. And I believe that's where he took his last breath, was in that recliner chair. I took him to get his feeding tube the day he's got his feeding tube, and that was a rough day. I took him to all his clinic appointments, and he and Albert would come with. Connie was a staple pretty much every day, or at least as much as you could, to get to see Jose and help him. He had a wonderful community of friends and family. So that made it a lot easier to be able to do if we just had a cure for ALS, and we still don't have a cure. So we fight hard every day, not only to help people living with the disease, but also to fund money for research. There's a lot of great research engines out there that are trying really hard to find a cure and a therapy. Currently today, there's only 2 therapies that are FDA approved. One's called Riluzole and another one's called Radicava, that are supposed to slow down progression in about 6 months. And you think about that in terms of the span of a lifetime. 6 months is not that much time. And in the world of ALS, we take advantage of, we take slightness of the fact that, you know, we all can get up. Everybody today here, I think, probably got up, took a shower, brushed their teeth, brushed their hair, put their clothes on, buttoned their pants, tied their shoes, orange. You know, all those things were done. So, in closing, I just want to say that, you know, ALS doesn't discriminate, okay? It doesn't matter what your age, whether you're male or female, does not care what skin color you are. ALS does not discriminate. And at the end, ALS always wins. We will never win. ALS will always win. My youngest patient, and I've been doing this for 17 years, my youngest patient was 14 when he got diagnosed, and my oldest was 90. And I've seen everything in between. And so I just hope in Jose's memory that we can all continue the fight against ALS. Go out there when you see fundraisers, do them in Massachusetts. I live in New York, so I cover the area down here. And I was very fortunate to consider myself a friend of Jose's. So if anybody has any questions regarding the disease or what CCALS does, please feel free to find me sometime throughout the day. I'll be here. Thanks, Ramon.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much. Chris Curtin is amazing. He literally was there to the end. Anytime that Jose needed somebody to just come by in the middle of the night, like, this man was literally there. Helped him with a machine that cost $16,000. This man was there. Like, it's amazing the type of work that CCALS does. So a round of applause to everything that you guys do, all right? And so just please keep the noise levels a little bit down, y'all. Please, thank you. Okay, con respeto, porque aquí se respeta, okay? All right, y'all. So very quickly, we're about to start the panel. All right, so first, right here, my beautiful Grace, that's Shabada, right? That's Grace, yes, give it up for Grace, all right? So Grace, her bio reads, NYCSGL Equality Coalition Steering Committee member, a Black woman of transgender experience, nationally recognized advocate and activist, and a writer. Okay, give it up for Grace. Right? And of course, my beautiful Connie, the founder of Recoveries Are Us, the reason why we are all here today, okay? Right? So, some of Connie's bio, she has a long life, has dedicated her life to the field of recovery and hopes to carry the message of change through education and mentoring programs. Connie. All right. And we got my friend over here, Richard Morales. Thank you for being with us, Richard. So Richard is the manager of community partnerships at the Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Community Center. He was previously the manager of the public program at El Museo del Barrio. He currently serves on the board of directors for Teatro Círculo, you know, that's my Puerto Rican Spanish there, you know. I know. The Clemente Soto Velez Center in New York City and the podcast Making Gay History. So thank you so much for being here today, Richard. Right? Okay, and I know you guys all heard from Richard in 2004. The services that they currently offer, provide services including equipment, educational workshops, Medicare, Medicaid assistance, guidance, and awareness in living with ALS end-of-life issues. So to our amazing panel, thank you so much for being here today. All right, and I'm actually going to pass the mic this way. And if you could give us like a short introduction about who you are and the services that you offer through your organization. Okay, let's start with Grace.
First of all, thank you for everyone coming. Earlier today, I was, because I'm so celebrated, and I kind of really don't like the word celebrated, I prefer the word recognized. I love the point that when you come from a whole lot of nothing to be something today, that's to be celebrated. And there's a lot of us in our community, those who are formerly incarcerated, those who are dealing with HIV, those who are dealing with substance abuse, those who are dealing with domestic from the stigma, because we are a community regardless what society thinks. The Osborne Association has been a journey that has been more than just helpful, but it has allowed me to bring my community. And when I say my community, I mean the LGBTQIA community, because a lot of times these organizations have been right here in our communities and they didn't speak to us. You went into these places and you only dealt with them because you had to when they were there. The work that I do is that I consolidate all those things that we do, whether it's recovery, whether it's referrals, whether it's housing, whether it's making sure that people have a good meal that night. It may seem very simple for some of us, but understand the stigma with being formerly incarcerated, the stigma of being 32 years HIV positive. And to stand here today to say that I've been, to know that I'm just still standing here when a society told me that you ain't supposed to be here. You ain't supposed to not only be HIV positive, you're not only supposed to be that, but you're not supposed to be educated. You're not supposed to have had a history of incarceration. And today I stand here now as a college educated, home, I have my own home, I have an organization that supports me, and more than anything, a community that embraces you. When your community embraces you, you almost say thank you just by existing. Because a lot of us, those paradigms that I just said, when you're formerly incarcerated, when you are affected by HIV and hepatitis and PTSD, I always get it wrong. PTSD, I'm so sorry. Okay, you know I love you. Okay. When you have suffered or been affected by this, there's always this hush. And this is what I go around the country talking about. And by the way, look at Hulu, on episode 4, right? On Hulu, I'm in that, where we talk about how we survive these things. So I want everybody to know that this is a happy day, a happy time. And not just because it's Pride, because we're here in June, July, August, September, November, and so on. Thank you for listening.
So, short. Hey, you guys in the front, can you please keep it down? Thank you.
Yes. So everyone in the front, please. The sound is echoing, and we got to be respectful to our beautiful panel. So everyone, if you guys are hearing me, we can hear you. You're supposed to only hear this side of the room. Please just keep it down, okay? All right. Thank you so much. There we go. I hear a little bump, but that's it. Bump, bump, bump. All right, so next, we're gonna hear from Connie. So if you want to, Richard, let's do Richard. All right, so Richard, I read your bio, just a little bit about you and what you do for your organization, the services that you provide.
Thank you. First off, thank you, Connie, for inviting me to be a part of this experience. And I obviously want to give a very big thanks to Ramon, who is, because of him, I'm here, and because of him, we're all in this space. And so I want to make sure I acknowledge that. And I think I had the honor actually to work with Jose Ramon at the center where I do arts and culture programming. I manage our exhibitions, our public programs, our book talks, presentations, anything that is built or brought to the space by community partnerships. I'm a department of one, so the partnership model is definitely helpful in terms of, you know, if you organize events, you know, it takes a lot of work to put these things together, and it's very helpful to build that within community. And I come from a community engagement background. I was born and raised in New York, parents of Puerto Rican descent, and for me, it was always important to looking at my family experiences. That's been the driving point behind the work that I do. My grandmother was an Afro-Puerto Rican. She came to New York and didn't know how to read or write because she was never taught that, and wound up working as a maid at the Visceral Hospital for years. And then my parents came over, and you know, my mom got caught up in raising kids and raising her kids' kids and her kids' kids. And so I definitely learned a lot about the work ethic through the women in my life. And that's definitely driven a lot of the work that I've done, where I did a lot of work with low-income, immigrant communities in order to provide them access to resources that exist that they didn't even know existed because of lack of translation of resources. We're talking about, you know, late 80s, early 90s, where, you know, we have things that are available in much more languages than at least I remember growing up with. And so I do a lot of that work through the arts programming. I started working with Cool Culture, which is an organization based in Brooklyn that works with early childcare centers and Head Start centers and provided them with resources to really build family through the arts. Oftentimes, you know, when we're coming from low-income or immigrant backgrounds, a lot of these families are working. There's very little time spent with building family, doing things as a family. My trip up here, I was talking to this Dominican cab driver, and he was talking about he's working 6 days a week, and he has a 7-year-old daughter that's stuck at home, and he doesn't know what to do. And I'm like, there's so many resources that are there that are available. It's just, there needs to be that work or more emphasis on the work of really building those bridges. And I find through a lot of work that I do with the arts programming is to build bridges within the community, to bring projects like Jose's to spaces like the center that, you know, if you know the LGBT community center, it's been around since 1983. It has its ups and downs. It hasn't always been, it's not the best place for everybody, but it's a space that provides resources for people that need them. And it's not just open to the LGBT+ community, it's open to anybody that is needing recovery programs, HIV testing, mental health counseling, immigration support, or legal clinics for people that are in search of asylum, which we saw a lot of that happen after the 2016 election. And where we are now, you know, where we're still in the midst of a pandemic, where our doors are closed to the public, when normally we would be open 5 days, 7 days a week, you know, we really had to take a step back and see how we did that. And I'll speak a little bit about that through some of the things I'll talk about later. But really, the drive behind this work is to create experiences for people that might not have that space or that platform, to really, instead of waiting for people to approach you with programming ideas, to go out into the community. As a public programmer, as a community organizer, you really need to go out into the community to see or hear what the community's wants and needs are. Like I always say, like 80–90% of the job is just showing up, right? And how you show up. Showing up to support things like this. Showing up to support the work that Grace does, or that Grace does with ALS work. And so I definitely push that with some of the work that I do, and I think, especially working with youth, it's important to put that message out there. As someone that worked in a museum setting before, I would always work with our team programs and say, you know what, you don't need to be an artist working in a museum. Museums need their lawyers, need their engineers, need their operations. You know, there's different ways that we can think about it. When we're talking about art and art programming, it's not always about pretty pictures, right? Because sometimes these things, as we've seen through projects like evoke, come from painful places. And it's just a matter of like how you translate or transfer that information so that way it not only addresses some of our own inner demons as artists, as creators, and performers, but also provides a window for people to step outside themselves and to also look into the experiences of other people so that way they can take that forward and bring that into their own communities and say, you know what, it does exist, it's out there. People like me are sitting at the table. And you know what, there's not that table there, but I built one myself. So how can we take that into our communities? How can we use art in our programming? Those are pretty much like the backbone of the things that I work on with our programming, at least art programming at the site. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Richard. Thank you. All right. That is beautiful. So we have, as you can see, an amazing panel. So I know that Connie and Chris, you guys kind of gave like a big introduction. So what we're going to do is we're going to go right into some of the questions specific to some of your organizations, okay? All right. So, Connie, I'll open up with the first question for you. So, your center is basically an LGBTQ recognized organization. How important for you is to build mentorship programs for the people you serve in the community?
Thank you. Yeah, so we are nationally recognized by GLCC, and so what we're trying to do, like I said before, the LGBT community is underserved when it comes down to substance use disorder. So I'm trying to promote individuals in the LGBT community to come and take our courses. And it's not that you need to be in the LGBT community to treat or address issues, or to counsel somebody in the LGBT community, right? But it's that much easier for individuals to be able to have that connection with someone from within the LGBT community, right? Because there's issues specific to that population. So what we want to do is that we want to encourage individuals to become counselors, right? Substance use counselors. Our training programs, it doesn't matter if you have a history of mental health, if you have a history of substance use, if you have a history of with the criminal justice system. It doesn't matter, and there's funding out there for individuals who qualify. So we want to encourage individuals to become counselors, recovery coaches. That's the new thing nowadays, recovery coaches, and peer advocates, right? So that we can service the community from within. Recovery Service is also, we are working on one of the big projects that I'm working on, and I believe that it's probably going to be one of the first ones in New York City, is the DIVAS program, and DIVAS stands for Drug Intervention versus Addiction Services. And that's going to be hopefully the first LGBT residential treatment facility for the LGBT community. Kids, when they come out, parents throw them out to the street. Like I said, there's services out there, but in treatment programs, there's a lot of like, where are they going to sleep? How do they identify, whether they identify female, whatever. Not in my program, that's not going to happen. So there's going to be room for everybody at the DIVAS table. So that's something that we're working on, and hopefully we'll open our doors in 2022. So yeah, so if you know of someone, even if you're interested in becoming either a substance use disorder counselor or recovery coach or peer advocate, definitely, you don't have to come to my school, any school. There's a lot of schools out there, but like you'll come to mine. Right? But there's schools out there that do what we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. All right, so the next question is for Grace. All right, so Grace, as a trans advocate, how important is it to raise awareness about trans issues? Talk to us about the process of the work you do in providing safe spaces, especially for those formerly incarcerated.
The great thing about doing this work, you get to talk to people who, for some apparent reason, believe that you're asking for something that's different. All you're asking is for an opportunity. What I do is that I always say to my trans and non-conforming individuals is first, be of service by getting the education and getting the things that are required where you can be of service. Just being trans and non-conforming is never enough. Conversation as I hadn't even passed my 90-day probation as anyone would have a job. And I had the opportunity of walking up the stairs with the president and didn't know who she was. And you know how sometimes you're thinking out loud, and I was saying, wow, what a great program. I would love to see some of mine. And I didn't say mine, I said, I wish some of the girls would come up in here and turn this up in here. And she said, well, why don't you come to my office? And I'm not noticing that I'm actually speaking to the president of an organization with 395 employees. I didn't know that. And that started the dialogue of saying to them that we don't need you to create a component for LGBTQ people. We just want the programs which you have and you make it a safe space for us. And today, since 2017, at all of our sites, any LGBTQIA person who wants the services in which Osborne provides, you're welcome, and it will give you a safe space. And a lot of times that's not given. You can go to your places like YMCA. You can go to these established places and they're creating these spaces. We don't need a creation because now you're saying you're special. We ain't special. Who we sleep with and who we represent just is. So I always say, whatever organization, wherever you work, whether it's McDonald's, you're a gas man, you deliver papers, just be inclusive and represent the audience and the community in which you represent to the best of your ability. Because we're living in a time now where everyone happens to either see, know, or heard about you. And when I speak to my allies, I mean, when you're at that football game or you're at the grocery store or the laundromat, and the lady who's a Jehovah's Witness or the lady who is sitting there talking about, well, them gays and them trannies and them folks, you need to let her know that you may be right about those people, but we also got these people like Grace Vera and Jamel and the wonderful man who saved my thought process, Jose Ramon. I was so privileged to be included in the photographs because I was the last one. I was the last one. And when he invited me to his home, I was almost astonished because a lot of times people see the shiny stuff. You see the articles, you see the TV, but y'all don't see the denials of people saying, we don't want that up in here, and I'm coming anyway. I go through that because I want society to see the best of us, because they, for some apparent reason, already know the worst of us. We can't do what has happened, but we have a lot to do and continue to do when it comes to representing where you come from. Whether it's the Bronx. Come on now, Bronx. Come on. Okay? When you represent the Bronx and you're going into these municipalities and these organizations that are not necessarily LGBT friendly, you are to represent us to your best ability. That is my platform now. I don't want to see another created LGBT organization. I want us to go and kick some of these doors in these established places. This is what visibility is like. Let's not enable our community by saying that we just got to have our own, because you automatically are saying that and letting them know that you don't want to work with them, because that's how they're going to take it. So I'm about visibility in places where they say we're not, because a lot, and then guess what? They're already. Because that is what has happened at the Osborne Association. We have always had LGBTQIA people there as employees. Now they're speaking up in their individual departments, and our mentoring program, and our youth programs. It feels good to see young, old, not so young, and not so old, walk into an organization that primarily no one thought that they were welcome. This is what my platform is, to go out into the highways and byways to those organizations that are already established. But like I said, come with the credentials. Come with the credentials. If you're going to do recovery, come to this young lady. She's going to make sure you're going to represent it well. And that's what this is about. It's not about enabling us and getting us in these safe spaces, because guess what? In those other organizations are like, bring that in here, but too bad we're bringing it up in here. And that is my message. That is what I do. When you see me on TV, when you see the books, understand that I'm with you, but I am about representing us to our best ability. I learned that was my last message that Jose said to me. I don't know how he even got in contact with me. To this day, I don't know how I got involved with White Shirt Project until he sat me down and he said, I love what you're doing because you're going places that other people have either been apprehensive, scared, or didn't think they were welcome. I don't know how you got in there. I don't know how you're going to the Muslim community. I don't know how you're doing all this stuff, Grace, because as I tell them, stop acting like we ain't up.
Okay, so let's keep it moving. So a question for Chris Curtin. So Chris, so there's like a statistic running around that it says like every 90 minutes someone gets diagnosed with ALS. Why is it that this disease doesn't get as much attention as like let's say other diseases?
Thank you, Jamal. It's a great question. Basically because it's an underfunded disease. So like I said earlier, there's only about 30,000 people living with ALS in the United States annually. And across the country, there's hundreds of thousands of people. But ALS is not cancer, right? ALS is a motor neuron disease. And it is because ALS is worthy of getting all the funding that it needs to find a cure. And that's why it's considered an underfunded disease. And the statistics are going up, and I truly believe, due to social media and all that's gone on since 2014, if you guys remember the Ice Bucket Challenge, okay? The Ice Bucket Challenge came in 2014, started by 3 young faces of ALS, one being Pat Quinn of Yonkers, New York, another gentleman, Anthony, afflicted with ALS, and one of their spouses started the Ice Bucket Challenge, and it went viral, raising hundreds of millions of dollars for research that really didn't go to research. It went to the National ALS Association. And ever since then, there's been a lot of great social media interaction with the community at large, the ALS community in the world, but we're still underfunded disease. And I do believe that in my work, through the years that I've been doing this work, that I don't think the statistics are right, actually. I think there's more people living with ALS than it's on paper. I get calls on the daily of, hey Chris, so-and-so, my friend so-and-so just got diagnosed, what should they do? Hey Chris, so-and-so just got, maybe might have a diagnosis in the LGBT community. And it's so much going on in his life, so much that he wanted to accomplish, so much that he wanted to do, including the White Shirt Project. Then he got afflicted by ALS. I bet you a lot of his friends, and Connie, you can attest to this. Did you know what ALS was before Jose got diagnosed? Okay, but a lot of people might not know. And to this day, if I sit on the corner right outside of this building, and I polled all the people coming by and said, do you know what ALS is? Maybe 1 out of 10 might say, yeah, I know what ALS is. And if you said, okay, you know what ALS is, what is it? Lou Gehrig's disease?
Right.
You know? But they wouldn't know that it's a motor neuron disease called amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. It affects the motor neurons in your brain, sending the waves every 90 seconds. Yeah, it's still an issue, it's still a problem. And that's why I'm here today to represent ALS and the community at large. And like I said earlier, I bet everybody in this room, you'll leave here, and at some point within the next year, ALS will come into your life somehow. And you'll remember having this conversation with me today. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much. All right. And so Question for you, Richard. What are some of the statistics of LGBTQ people of color, and what are some of the disparities in relation to mental health, and how they're impacted by those disparities and how it affects their mental health? If you could speak to a little bit of that.
Oh, sorry. We don't have to say.
To the pandemic and what's happened in terms of programming. You know, it's a sad statistic, but with COVID, we saw over 40% increase of people needing our recovery programs. So there was a lot of relapse that happened, and you know, there are many stories as to why that takes place or why that happens. But I think if we're looking at, you know, we're all zoomed out, right? We're all like over online meetings, but the silver lining with that is that we're also able to access different communities that aren't just New York City based. You know, I think Zoom, I don't think it's gonna go away, or like online programming is not gonna go away. We really need to like take advantage of this a number of events that take place at nighttime in New York City that, for instance, can't make it because they can't see at night. You know, so how can we think creatively about utilizing the technologies that we've had, that we've all unfortunately been forced to like navigate, and then take that forward? So, you know, that's been a sad statistic, but it's also been a little bit enlightening in the sense that we're able to at least have a further impact beyond the building that's located in Manhattan. And this is why I think like expos like this are super important. Going out into the community is very important, because oftentimes like I find that a lot of LGBTQ services, they're always in Manhattan, right? And so we need more of these in place of a bigger number in a larger community. Youth programming, that's from our end, that's kind of been reduced, and we thought actually the opposite, because we're like, oh, they're young, they'll have no problem connecting to the internet. They're on Instagram all the time, but the fact is that they're on Instagram all the time, and they're in online classes all the time, that a lot of the programming that we saw dropped by more than 50% in terms of youth that were accessing our services. And that's also due to a number of factors. There's accessibility issues that we need to address. A certain mayoral candidate, I won't name this person, but he said that he wants to make sure that all New York City kids have bikes, right? And my thing is like, okay, that's the candidate that I'm not voting for, because really what you need to focus on is like giving computers to kids that need that, so that we're at the same pace as everybody else, right? So everybody is coming from a queer affirming space where they can talk about these issues openly in a room where, say, you might be living with 5 people in one room, right? So these are some of the factors that I think for us, we definitely needed to look at. And once we move everything online, really have to take a step back and say, okay, why are we doing this? Was one of the first questions. How are we going to do this? Was the second question. And then once we have those tools in place, it's like, okay, what are we doing now so that way we rethink some of these models? Because I think this is what, at least for me and our partnerships came up, is like, okay, what is the purpose of the partnership? How can we make this a bit more intentional to get the impact that we really want to get from people, and not repeat the same mistakes that we were doing before? Right? Like the elderly community, the communities that are less mobile, to be able to interact with us. You know, we are living in New York City where we have the privilege of having a lot of these resources available to us. And I think we forget the fact that there are other countries, there are other places that don't have these things. I did a program with an LGBT and trans organization based in Peru, for instance, and at the onset of the pandemic, there were basically a number of sex workers, for instance, that they had no proteins that they were eating. They were basically just eating rice, and their quarantine was heavily militarized and policed, that from a New York perspective, we take for granted, because we're like, oh, damn, I have to wear a mask outside in public. But there are places that you can't even walk out your door at 6 p.m. So if we're able to like utilize those, I found that in our programming, like that increased a bit more than what we were doing before, where everything was a bit more locally based. And so I'm all for international exchange.
All right, thank you so much, Richard. All right, so we're running a little bit over the time, but I did want to just, I guess, real quick, does anybody in the audience at least have one question? Okay, so I'm gonna give it to you, Joel. All right, real quick, because I want to wrap up, and then as soon as Connie comes back, we got a special surprise.
Thank you. I just have a question about ALS. What is the similarities and differences between ALS and MS?
That's a great question. They're considered to be cousin diseases because they're both motor neuron diseases. ALS is a much more aggressive form of a motor neuron disease. MS is another motor neuron disease, but it's the much slower progressing disease. So you can live with MS 20, 25, 30 years. And again, with MS today, there's a lot more therapies. There's brain stimulation. There's all sorts of therapies that we're doing with MS that are really making people live a lot longer. But again, MS is a much slower progressing disease. So, you know, I actually have a friend who's probably around 50. He's had MS for at least 20 years and is really doing fine right now. Knock on wood. So we don't have the differences with MS. You have time. ALS, you don't have time. Time is against your side. Does that answer your question? Thank you.
Thank you. You have an amazing panel to unpack. Connie has a special surprise. We're going to wrap up the panel, but before we wrap up, she has a special surprise. So you want to come up here, Connie? Oh, Sam, she's ready. All right.
So before we end, this was a conversation that I had with Joey a couple of days before he passed away. I don't know if I mentioned this, but I walked Joey down the aisle when he got married March 14th, 2020. I held his hand and walked him down the aisle. And I also held his hand on March 14th, 2021, when he took his last breath. So this relationship we had is very, very powerful. Conversation that we had prior to that was that he entrusted the White Shirt Project and the LGBT Expo, and he said to continue doing certain things. He wanted me to do certain things in a certain This is, you guys don't understand the kind of work that Chris does. Chris, you know, would come 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and I know I was there, to be by his side, to be by Joey's side. He continues to do that work. So with in the memory of Jose Ramon, we want to present you this $3,000 check from Compassion Care ALS. Yeah, come here, get that. This is another one of Jose's friends that was very excited to the end. Yeah, Hector, you know, you have a couple of people here from the White Shirt Project. That's right. So the promise was that it's money for Compassionate Care ALS and the White Shirt Project.
Amazing. Thank you.
You guys got all your pictures? So we're wrapping up now. All right.
So I encourage, so a round of applause to all of our panelists. Thank you so much. Amazing information. So please, I encourage each and every one of you to go around and meet your panelists, talk to them, ask them questions. Some of them are tabling. This is important stuff. This is important information. And without this, you know, like Chris was saying, you never know who's going to be affected in your life by ALS. You know, who's going to need the LGBT Center and other services that you guys, that you guys offer. So thank you so much to our panelists. You guys are amazing. And so yes, anybody else? We had one question. Anybody else before we go? Have one more question? Yes.
So I want to ask, is there a way for prevention for ALS, early prevention? Chris.
Unfortunately, Unfortunately, the answer is no, there is no cure right now to ALS. There's only two therapeutic FDA-approved drugs. I said earlier, one's called Riluzole right now. A lot of great research going on with identifying gene therapies that can help people with ALS, depending on what kind of ALS you have. So I would say in 2021, we're more hopeful than we've ever been towards getting a cure within our lifetime, or within my lifetime, but we're still miles away, unfortunately.
Thank you.
What are the symptoms? Symptoms of ALS are very, very broad, depending on what type of ALS you have. So
how would someone know?
okay, so it's quite a process to diagnose ALS. It usually takes anywhere from 6 to 12 months with a battery of tests. What they try to do is rule out everything possible, whether it's a dropped foot, whether it's carpal tunnel scans, MRIs. One of the defining tests is an EMG, which requires sometimes a spinal tap, and they draw out the fluids in your stem cell to determine on the fact that you might have ALS. But yeah, it can be a very arduous process of determining it. Some people are very lucky and they find a great neurologist right away that will help them with their diagnosis, but usually you're not sent to a neurologist right away. So it's a process, unfortunately.
Thank you for your question. Thank you, Chris, for that answer. Yeah.
Very quickly. One of the things that with Joey, before he was actually diagnosed, he didn't know what was going on. And he started, it was almost like he felt like there was something in his throat. And that was one of the things, like you said, and his speech started to get affected by that. And that's how he started testing. But it wasn't until months later that he was actually diagnosed because they couldn't find what was wrong.
Exactly. Thank you for that, Connie. So one of the main questions that I have for any of the panelists, is there anybody in the audience, is there anything that you feel that we're leaving out as far as information, questions you may have, just in general? Yeah.
Yes.
So if I want to know, basically, if I have this, I would have to get a spinal thing? Is that?
You'd want to go to a neurologist, and you want to have a neurologist give you a determination. Specializes in ALS. And there's plenty of great doctors in the tri-state area, especially here in Manhattan. There's some, Joey's neurologist team was at Columbia Presbyterian. So we spent a lot of time down there pre-COVID, going to his appointments and getting things that he needed. And they stood with him all the way through till the end of his journey. And, it was a trying time because it was during COVID. But we were able to get him everything he needed despite COVID. And like Connie said, he had a very aggressive form of ALS. It's called bulbar onset. So it starts up here versus starting down in your limb onset, whether it's your foot, your arm, whatever. His started up here, it started in his mouth, he started to slur his words, having trouble swallowing. And again, that's called bulbar onset. It's a much more aggressive form of ALS, unfortunately.
So it's very scary. I can't even imagine. So thank you all for your questions. Any other questions from the audience? And then I'm going to come down. Yeah.
In regards to all the topics that we've covered today, I think it's really important to keep the dialogue going, keep conversations going.
Yes, amazing. Keep the dialogue going, definitely. I also wanted to share that I do have other resources on mental health, all right? So if you Google mental health, there's an organization, it's called SAMHSA, and they have suicide prevention, mental health resources. There's a lot of grant-funded organizations that are in the room and throughout New York that get funds from SAMHSA. So definitely, if you want more information on that, just let me know. Okay, so all this information is going to be here because I know that today we wanted to educate people and we wanted to provide information and great resources.
Legacy alive is not easy. Dealing with all these models that you had to deal with, all these people slowing up or not showing up. Know this, that the community is here for us. Whatever your needs are, We have Destination Tomorrow here. We have a lot of people here. Please go around the tables and see some of the needs that this community serves. Thank you so much for coming out. Thank you.
And how about those, that $3,000 for compassionate care ALS? That is amazing. That is amazing. Honey, anything else that you wanted to say, that you feel like we're leaving out? Anything else from the audience before we wrap it up? All right? No?
So don't go anywhere because we're gonna have the vendors come up and talk about their specific agencies, so don't go.
As I like to call it. And I'm so happy and honored and so excited that we have an expo right here at Pelham Parkway. First time ever, I believe.